One of the questions that I get asked more than anything else is about carbohydrates, and are they really okay to include in your diet? Now, the answer is not as simple as a yes or a no. It's quite complex, and it really depends on the carbohydrate, when it's being consumed and why it's being consumed. I want to start out by saying every single type of carbohydrate has its place. What I mean by that is even the things that we know that aren't so healthy, so something like your soft drink or your lollies, they can have a place in certain instances. For example, in somebody who's highly active, soft drink, which has had the bubbles removed, and lollies can be used really effectively to help with improving athletic performance. But from a day-to-day perspective, what should we be choosing? What types of carbohydrates are okay to eat on a daily basis, and should we be including on a daily basis? Now, carbs are super important when it comes to improving both athletic performance as well as helping with your brain to function really well, because carbohydrates are actually your brain's favourite source of fuel. When we think about carbs, often people will think straight away about pasta or about bread. Now, they are absolutely probably the most common carbohydrates that a lot of us eat or maybe don't eat. But there's other types of carbohydrates as well. So legumes are a great source of carbohydrate. Fruit is another great source of carbohydrate, and it depends on the fruit on if it's a high or low GI option. And there's all sorts of other foods which contain carbohydrates as well. So certain vegetables are particularly rich in carbohydrate. So something like your potato is really rich in carbohydrate. Sweet corn, same deal. Even things like yogurt and milk contain carbohydrate naturally. It's a naturally occurring sugar which is there. Now, when it comes to trying to choose these healthy carbohydrates, how do you figure it out? How do you know which ones are healthy? Essentially, the less processed the carb is, the better. So something like those white breads, the lollies, the soft drinks, we know that they're the less healthy options. They have their place, but we only include them sometimes. Whereas your whole grain breads, your wholemeal pastas or legume-based pastas, brown rice or certain types of white rice, legumes, quinoa is another grain which is a really fantastic one. Pearl barley would be one of my favourite whole grains to incorporate because of how low GI and low glycemic load that is. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So being mindful of incorporating all of these different things in varied amounts. Another one that I'd really like to call out is oats. So oats are a really great low GI option, which are really useful to include in things like your porridge, your muesli, or blended up in smoothies. They've got great nutrients when it comes to things like beta-glucan, which is helpful for managing cholesterol levels. They break down really slowly, so it helps with keeping blood sugar levels really steady as well. And on top of that, it's actually also a decent source of iron as well. Now, when it comes to glycemic load and glycemic index, I think it's important to call these out as well when we're talking about if carbohydrates are okay. Glycemic load indicates how much carbohydrate something has, and glycemic index indicates how quickly something breaks down. Now, the best types of carbohydrates are both low glycemic load and glycemic index. And that's where barley comes in as being a really amazing choice when it comes to your types of carbohydrate to include more regularly. A good example of something which is high GI but low glycemic load is actually watermelon. So watermelon, whilst it digests quite quickly, so it sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap, it's really low glycemic load. What that means is as it breaks down, even though it's breaking down quickly, it only causes a very quick, small spike rather than a really big, quick spike, which you might see in something like some lollies or some soft drink. So you can see that when we're looking at carbohydrates, they're not all created equal. How they're broken down in your body is really important when it comes to thinking about if it's a healthy option or if it's not a healthy option. But choosing things which are minimally processed as often as possible is the best thing you can do to make sure you're making great choices. Your carbohydrate requirements will depend on your own unique circumstances, and in particularly in relation to your gender, your body size, as well as your physical activity levels. I hope this helps you to feel confident in choosing some great carbohydrates to support your own unique needs and not fearful of incorporating them into your diet.